Learn how this is bound to an object when a method is called from that object. In this example, we are going to be looking at how a function is called as an object method, and that showing that this keyword refers to that object itself. So together, let's go through the steps of creating these examples. Now, inside my script tag, I have some steps that I've already commented out for streamlining of the process of making this example. Is why I did that, so that we don't have to be going over it from scratch again. So I've outlined the steps. Number one says you should create uh, an object for a person, add method inside it. Inside the method, return the this, and then call the method and display result. So what we are talking about here is this that you can see on the screen. This actually is a keyword from JavaScript, and you want to see how it refers to an object where it is being used, and also how you can call a function as an object method. That is what we are about to learn in this example. So let's move on. The first thing is that we need to create a person object. So, and how do you do that? Where the name of the object is person, and we follow the normal way of creating an object. And inside this object, I'll add a first name, call it John. Last name, call it Doe. And I'm just going to add an item inside this. And aside from that, I also want to add a method. You can see add method my function inside this. So I'll go ahead and add the function. So the name of the function, the name of the method rather should be my function. So I will go ahead and make my function and add it as a method inside the object. So function, and I'll just return this, just like this. So now that I have this object created, now I can move down and say, okay, I need a way to call the method and display the data from our object. So how do we do that? Well, the usual way, document.get element by id. And then how do I update the element? I'll use inner.html property to update it. Now, before I finally call the method to display the results, I want to quickly take us through the process. You can see that the first thing we did here is that we created a person object, and inside it we added a method, called my function. So this is a method inside an object, and then our function is simply basically returning this, as you can see. So now we want to call that method inside the object and show us how what we have here refers to this same person object and also display data on the screen. So let's go ahead and do that. So how do we call the method and display result? Well, let's add this string and say this is person dot the object's name. And then how do you call a function in this scenario? Well, it could have been enough in order to just do this, since I'm accessing the properties that I have inside the object. What I'm saying is this, it will have been enough if I just do something like this. First name, and you can see this is John, or I change this to something like maybe last name. This as well will work, or ID using the dot notation. So this as well will work. But if I do the same thing for function, my function, which happens to be a method inside my object, what do you think is going to happen? As you can see, so it's not actually passing or processing the value. It is instead returning this which is the property of our method. But in order to actually make this display a result, let's add an opening and opening and closing bracket as if we are calling a function to it, and see what happens. Now you can see this is object, which is the correct thing that we expect to see in our screen. So the key concept here is that method call bind this to object. So what we have here is simply referring to this, and that is why you are saying object. So it automatically binds this to object and not even just the value alone. So this keyword can return the whole object, and binding as well can happen at call time. As you can see, when we call the method here, you can see that it immediately gives us this is object. So here we return this inside the method, which is what we did here. And then since we call it as a person.myFunctions method, this refers to the person object. So the entire object is what is returned, as you can see on the screen. Call it on the object and this becomes that object, and that exactly is what we have here in our code. So this is how JavaScript links method to their objects during execution. Ideally, this is not fixed. I mean, this keyword is not fixed. It is determined when the function is called, an object method binds it automatically, as you can see it in this example.